You're listening to Edge of Faith, a multimedia magazine where we discuss art and culture through a Christian lens. So Sandy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to talk about what I care so much about. So thanks for the invitation.
Oh, absolutely. And at Edge of Faith, we care about what you're talking about as well. And, that kind of leads me into the first question, which, every Christian knows, or, at least I hope they know, that we're mandated by God to be good stewards of the planet. It's his creation. The problem is many people have different interpretations of what that means. Some think that stewardship means we own it and that we just exploit it and that God's good with that. So perhaps you could share some of your biblical understanding of the subject with us so we can have a common point of reference as we continue.
Yeah, this is a very interesting common ground, or trying to get to that common ground. As I talk about in the book, I've been traveling around speaking on this topic, either in classrooms or at conferences for at least a decade. And what I find all the time is there tend to be three reasons, at least for American Christians, why it's very hard to engage this topic and to define what stewardship should look like. And I named three of them in the introduction. One of them has to do with politics, and I think that's a very compelling, or not even compelling, I should say, major barrier for most people. And when I say politics, I don't mean kingdom politics. I mean American politics. Not even international, American politics. And what has happened over the decades is that Christianity has come to be associated with a particular political party. And if I dare speak it out loud, if you are a Christian, you're supposed to be a Republican. And you're supposed to be a Republican because the Republican Party historically is pro-life. But historically, they are not pro-environment. And so I have found in so many conversations is that environmental concern has been shoved into a particular political box, that would be the Democratic box, and defined non-Christian by association. And so I challenge folks right off the bat to suspend their national politics for a moment, and let's talk about kingdom politics. The second issue that I think is huge is, as with so many issues of social concern, we, the Western majority voice, are largely sheltered from the impact of environmental degradation on the global community. And it's not that we don't care, it's that we don't see how unregulated use of land and water by big business decimates the lives of the marginalized. We don't see this as an issue of the widow and the orphan, where it very much is. And then a third issue that I think makes it very challenging for Christians is that there is a theological perspective out there, taught by many in the church, that the created order is bound only for destruction. And as a result, many devoted followers of Jesus have come to believe that it's ethically appropriate to use the earth's resources as aggressively as possible to save souls, to do what actually matters in that theological framework. And so those are the three issues I name in my introduction. They're the ones I crash into all the time. And I start the book by launching an argument against this. And the argument is a biblical argument. It's a sweeping biblical argument. I start in Genesis and I don't finish until we get to the New Jerusalem, and talk about the fact that the biblical text actually cares deeply about the way humans interact with creation. So that's how I launch it. please go ahead and redirect me or ask me to specify.
No. I think that's a great start, and I think as we go, you'll be able to break that down more. Probably even in the next question I ask. As I was reading it, I got to chapter 4, which is the wild creatures entrusted to Adam. And you referenced the book of Job, which is, always makes people's brains hurt anyway. But you give him, or you discuss, there's a list of questions God had for Job about the planet. And I think that'll get us into a little deeper. And then, it was really interesting when you talked about some of the diversity of wildlife and things that, and other interesting points about Israel and how things have changed over time. So maybe you could elaborate some of those points and enlighten us with that.
Yeah, for sure. On the broader question, Israel engaging this creation care, I had said just a few moments ago that the book intends to mount a biblical argument as to why environmental stewardship matters to the kingdom. And that because I think Christians get stuck in this kind of no man's land, this zone between wanting, indeed, to be faithful Christians and wanting to be good citizens and not knowing what our rule of faith and practice says about this issue. So that is my primary ambition in writing the book, is to provide the faithful believer with, okay, what does my rule of faith and practice have to say about this? And as you said in your first question, one of the issues here is that question of dominion. If Adam has been given dominion, and should I say Adam, meaning humanity, has been given dominion, then why are we responding to the earth instead of the earth responding to us? And so that's a larger theological pool as well. And I think that many people are afraid that caring for creation somehow diminishes human sovereignty over creation. And one of the arguments I make is that we have been given, as humans, dominion with accountability. That's what is happening in the creation account in Genesis 1 and 2. And as we follow the text through and interact with the Mosaic covenant and Israel's experience, we see that this landed people of God is being asked to do the same thing that Adam and Eve were asked to do, a level of dominion with accountability. And the dominion, of course, is directed to the land, but the accountability is directed to God. And the type of dominion we've been given echoes the sort of dominion that God himself is practicing. So these are huge and important issues. Let me narrow down to this question about the book of Job. When the passages that I'm quoting are coming out of chapters 38 through 40, which are the climax of the book and in my opinion, some of the most beautiful poetry you can find in the entire Old Testament. I linger over these chapters regularly because they're just so lovely. And what's happening is, as we all know, Job has experienced this horrible trauma. He's lost his business, his health, his wealth, and his children, and he's suffering terribly. And he's crying out to God to hear him. And as he's crying out to God to hear him, he kind of turns a corner where, as opposed to just crying out, he begins to accuse God of injustice. And in chapter 38, God shows up. And when he shows up in these just phenomenal passages, he hammers Job with a series of questions. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, when I determined its measurements? Surely you know. Where were you when I called the sea forth for birth and I laid its boundaries? Do you know when the wild gazelle gives birth? If so, tell me all about it. So as we walk through these passages, we see that God celebrates the created order. He is as intoxicated by the beauty of creation as we are, and calls Job on the carpet accordingly. And I think this speaks deeply to the beauty of creation, to the Creator's celebration of his own creativity, and, of course, Job's responsibility and reaction as a creation in the midst of that. So I love those chapters.
Yeah, they're beautiful. And thank you for enlightening us with it. So, in Stewards of Eden, it is absolutely packed with data. I mean, when you're going through even just, like the chapter 4, when I'm thinking that there's so much information on different wildlife and things that were there at different points. And then tons of biblical research where you're pulling things about, like with Job and other places in the Bible, in other chapters. I was wondering, what was one of the most interesting or elucidating tidbits you discovered while you were researching this for this book?
Well, as it speaks of in the bio and the like, my expertise in biblical studies involves archaeology, economics, the socio-political setting of the biblical text. So I've always been super interested in the land of Israel and the species that inhabited it, the crops that are being grown, how the real people of the Old Testament were carrying out their lives. So delving into the animals that they're raising and how those animals serve them and how they practiced agriculture and what the ethics of warfare were, all of these things, I find all that stuff fascinating. And it's my hope that as people pick up Stewards of Eden, which was designed to be brief and accessible, that they're getting fascinated by these things too. So tidbits, gosh, there are thousands of them. But I think the bigger picture for me is being able to animate the people of the Old Testament, to help my readers and my students see that these are real people who lived in another place and time, but they're struggling with the exact same things we are. How are they going to feed their kids? How are they going to hang on to some level of economic stability? How are they going to create a world that looks better than the world of their parents and their grandparents? And struggling with all of these things through the realities of the subsistence culture. Well, let me say that differently, a subsistence economy and a kinship-based culture. So I think that for us as modern readers, that getting past that barrier, so that cultural gap, so that we can see them as real people, is one of the most challenging and, for me, one of the most exciting bridges to cross, where they become our people, and we can see our struggles in their lives. And this is one of the points I make in the book, that although they're living in a world that doesn't have incredibly complex farm machinery or factory farming or the capacity to do mountaintop removal coal mining, their world might look different, but they're struggling with the same set of questions. Will they actually allow their land to lie fallow for a full year because Yahweh commanded it? They're going to take an economic hit if they do that. Will they actually take a Sabbath on the seventh day of the week? And will they really let their domestic animals do the same? When they step into new territory and they're commanded, yes, you can take the eggs or the baby birds, but you can't take the mother too. Will they, actually obey those commands, which are vastly inconvenient and hit them in the core of their pocketbook? Same questions were being asked, just on a different scale.
And we know the answer today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And the answer today is we won't take that hit.
Right.
And the answer is we'll find some, and so often some excuse to go after an exclusively consumer mentality. And as I talk about in one of the chapters in the book, I think if the prophet Jeremiah were walking down Main Street today, his number one message would be our rampant consumerism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I guess we're coming closer to the end here. I know, as I mentioned, the book is just filled with so much information. It's wonderful. I could talk to you about it.
I'm wondering, I was going to ask you, what grabbed your attention when you read it? Something that was new or different or you hadn't thought about before?
Honestly, it's still chapter 4 with how much Israel's changed over the centuries, with what all was there and how diverse it was, and that it was a pathway between Asia and Africa, which I did know that, but then how just having that kind of commerce even changed it, and that's nowhere near the volume of things that we do today. It was fascinating to see how we always know that humans have this, incredibly large footprint, much larger than what each individual really has. But it's just amazing to see how we just walk it like, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better word, like human privilege, and just destroy the earth. It's insane.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that we wind up destroying ourselves in the process, which the gospel is so full of that message from start to finish, that our own appetites destroy us.
I think if we were watching it as a movie, people would go, wait, I see where this is going, stop. But they don't see it in their own lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you.
So, with that being said, like I said, there's so much in the book, and one, we probably can't talk about it for 14 hours because no one wants to listen that long. And also, you might want people to pick up the book so they can actually just read it and absorb it better. So, but what I would like to know is just, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to give to Edge so that they can, and the audience, so that they, know what to do moving forward?
Well, I'd be thrilled if people were willing to read the book. I do want to say that I intentionally kept it short, and I intentionally kept it just Bible. And I did that because this is such a controversial topic in the church. I want folks to be able to step into this book and feel safe. Like, okay, my heart is open. What do the scriptures have to say about this topic? I don't want to hear the outcry and the acerbic rhetoric that's all over the news. I want to hear what my rule of faith and practice has to say. So that's who the book is intended for. I am hoping that it will become a companion to the college student, that they'll be able to bring it home and hand it to their parents, and they'll even be able to bring it home and hand it to their grandparents. And everybody will be able to say, hey, I see my Bible in here, and I see the character of my God in here. At the end of the book, there is a small appendix of how can we respond. How does the responsive Christian start taking steps forward? So that's one thing I'd like people to know that's in there. And one thing also in the conclusion that continues to really humble me is the quote I open up with. in the conclusion. It's coming from Gus Speth, who was the chairman of the Council of Environmental Quality under President Jimmy Carter. This guy is an environmentalist from start to finish, 30 years in the industry, total insider. And I pulled this quote out of an interview with him, and as a Christian, it really struck me between the eyes. So if you'll indulge me, I'd love to read it.
Sure.
Okay. This is Speth speaking, and in the interview he says, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these things, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." When I read those words, what I heard as a Christian leader was the scientific world can't answer the core of the problem. And I read that quote, and I found myself jumping out of my seat with my hand in the air saying, we, we the church, that's our arena. We know how to deal with that. That's who we are. And at our best, that's who we've always been. The moral compass of a society lost. And my cry in this book is that the church at its best would jump out of its seat and say, "Here I am. Send me. This is our arena, and we know how to address these issues." And it is my hope and my prayer that we will.
Amen to that. Sandy, thank you once again for spending time with us and educating us, and for writing the book, and just hanging out. Thanks a lot.
You too. I'm so honored to be interviewed, and I hope that a whole bunch of your listeners will get online and buy themselves a book and see what we can do to carry out our calling as God's image bearers on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you so much.